In 1028 AD, a Norse captain named Sigurd Thorvaldsson ordered his crew to stop rowing, not because of a storm, not because of rocks, because something beneath the surface was moving toward them, and it was longer than his ship. 3 men jumped overboard before he could stop them. None of them were ever found. That account exists. It was recorded by a Christian monk at a monastery in Iceland who interviewed the survivors. Sigurd himself refused to describe what he saw in detail. He said only one thing before he died, and it was this: it was not a fish. The Norse did not invent Jörmungandr out of nothing. That is the first thing you need to understand. When the Vikings built their mythology, they built it from what they encountered at sea. They were not a people who invented monsters for entertainment. They were a people who cataloged what they found and then tried to explain it. Jörmungandr, the Midgard Serpent, the world encircler, the creature so large that it bites its own tail while wrapping around the entire earth, was not the product of a bored storyteller. It was the product of men who came back from the open Atlantic changed, and who needed language large enough to describe what they had seen. This is the story of what they saw, what the Norse records actually say, and why modern marine biologists have stopped laughing. In 870 AD, a man named Naddod became one of the first Norsemen to reach Iceland. He did not go looking for Iceland. He got pushed off course in the North Atlantic by weather that should not have been as violent as it was. When he finally made landfall, he described the journey in terms that were later recorded in the Landnámabók, the Icelandic Book of Settlements. In his account, and in the accounts of several other early Norse explorers, there are references to things in the water that behaved differently from anything the Norse had a name for. Long, dark, moving against the current, surfacing briefly and then disappearing. The Norse word they used in multiple accounts was ormr. It means serpent, but it also means rope. It means something long and without legs. It is the same root word that gives us Jörmungandr. The scholars who have gone back through these texts keep running into the same problem. The descriptions are too consistent across too many different sources to be pure fiction. Sailors from different regions, different decades, describing the same general shape, the same movement, the same sense that whatever they were looking at was too large to be a known animal. Here is where it gets specific. There is a document called the Konungs Skuggsjá, the King's Mirror, written in Norway around 1250 AD. It is not a mythology text. It is a practical handbook, written in the form of a dialogue between a father and his son, designed to teach young Norwegian men about the realities of trade and travel. It covers commerce, court behavior, military conduct, and then in the section on the seas around Iceland and Greenland, it stops and describes 3 creatures that the author says any serious traveler must know about. Not mythological creatures. Real ones. Things that sailors had reported encountering. The first creature it describes is clearly what we would now call a whale. The description matches. The second creature is harder to identify, but matches some descriptions of giant squid behavior. The third creature, and this is the one, is described as follows. It appears like an island. It does not eat using a mouth in the conventional sense. It moves in a way that disturbs the entire surface of the sea around it, and if a ship is caught near it when it submerges, the suction alone can drag the vessel under. The author of the King's Mirror does not call this creature Jörmungandr. He calls it the Hafgufa, but he writes about it with the same tone he uses to describe whales and trade routes. He writes about it like it is real. Now hold that document in your mind, because in 1997, the United States Navy recorded something in the Pacific Ocean that they could not explain. The recording is called the bloop. It was captured by hydrophones, underwater microphones originally placed by the US military to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War. The bloop was louder than any known biological source. It was louder than a blue whale, It rose in frequency over roughly 1 minute and then stopped. The sound profile was consistent with something alive. In 2012, NOAA officially reclassified the bloop as icequake activity, the sound of large Antarctic ice fractures. But the original analysts, before that reclassification, had noted that if the sound was biological, the creature producing it would have to be significantly larger than any animal currently in the fossil record. That detail did not make the 2012 press release. Go back to the Norse sailors in the North Atlantic in the 9th and 10th centuries. They were operating in some of the deepest, coldest, least explored water on Earth. The Norwegian Sea reaches depths of over 4,000 meters. The waters north of Iceland drop into trenches that were not fully mapped until the late 20th century. These men had no sonar, no depth charts, no satellite data. They were navigating by stars and memory across an ocean that was still, in every meaningful sense, unknown. And they kept seeing the same thing: long, moving, too large. In the Prose Edda, the 13th century Icelandic text that is the single most important surviving source for Norse mythology, Snorri Sturluson writes that Jörmungandr lies at the bottom of the ocean, surrounding all the land of the world. He is so large that he can grasp his own tail. When he releases it, the world ends. This is usually read as mythology, as symbol, as metaphor for the circular nature of time or the boundary between order and chaos. But Snorri Sturluson was not writing pure fiction. He was a politician, a historian, and a lawyer. He was meticulous. When he described the geography of Iceland, he was accurate. When he described legal customs, he was accurate. The Prose Edda is not a random collection of stories. It is a deliberate attempt to preserve, in written form, an oral tradition that was rapidly being erased by the spread of Christianity. Snorri was writing down what people had believed, and in many cases, what people had reported, for centuries. The idea that he simply invented Jörmungandr from nothing contradicts everything we know about how he worked. Now here is the account that researchers keep returning to. In 1028 AD, the same year Sigurd Thorvaldsson's crew abandoned ship in the waters north of Iceland, there were at least 4 separate reports from Norse vessels in the North Atlantic describing encounters with large unidentified objects in the water. Not the same object. 4 different crews, different routes, different months. The accounts share 3 details. The object was longer than the ship. It moved in a direction contrary to the current. And it did not surface completely. Only part of it broke the water, and that part alone was wider than a man's outstretched arms. These accounts do not appear in mythology texts. They appear in trade logs and travel records. The giant oarfish, Regalicus glesne, can reach lengths of over 8 meters. It lives in deep water and almost never surfaces. When it does surface, it is usually dying. Marine biologists believe it can grow significantly larger than the specimens that have been recovered, because the ones found are almost always juvenile or sick animals. What a fully grown giant oarfish looks like. What it looks like alive and moving at the surface. No one knows. No one has ever filmed one behaving normally in its natural depth. What we do know is that it is long, serpentine, silver, and it moves in a way that no other known animal moves. There are documented cases of giant oarfish washing ashore in Norway. The oldest of those documented cases goes back to the 13th century. Sigurd Thorvaldsson never sailed again after 1028. He spent the remaining years of his life at a farm in western Iceland. He was known in his community as a reliable man, a practical man, a man who was not given to exaggeration. The monk who recorded his account, a man named Brother Asgeir, noted specifically that Sigurd seemed not frightened when he spoke about what he had seen. He seemed certain. He said the word again before he died. Not a fish. Whatever was in the water north of Iceland in 1028 AD, Sigurd Thorvaldsson went to his grave knowing exactly what it was not. The waters where he encountered it have never been fully surveyed.